Hello, and a very warm welcome to my YouTube. My name's Chris, and in today's film, I'm going to take a look at the variation or variants of armament that the de Havilland Mosquito carried during its service in World War II. Mosquito NF Mark II and the Mosquito FB Mark very often carried four 20mm Hispano Mark II cannons, as well as four .303 Browning machine guns. Now this alone could pack quite a punch, and in some rare cases they also trialled the Mosquito, the FB Mk.XVIII, which carried the Molins gun, which was 57mm and effectively was an anti-tank gun. We're going to hear an interview with Flight Lieutenant Brian Beattie. He was a pilot on the Mosquito Mk.XVIII with 248 Special Detachment Squadron. The Mark 18 Mosquito was fitted with a 57mm Molins 6-pounder class autocannon. This was nicknamed the Tsetse. It was originally an anti-tank gun adapted for airborne use. It had an automatic feed mechanism developed by the Molins company. The gun was mounted in the nose of the aircraft slightly off-centre and angled slightly downward to compensate for recoil and aiming. It fired shells via the autoloader in combat mode. It could fire about one round every 1.5 seconds.
On sighting the target ships, the anti-flak boys would go in first, firing their machine guns and cannon. As soon as we were within range, all we had to do was to yell out on the VHF, and by the time we had dived and lined up at about 2,500 feet, we were ready to fire. In the course of that dive, it was possible to get off 6, maybe 7 rounds. More than that, not a good idea, because you'd probably hit the mast of the ship.
The .303 machine guns had a total of 1,400 rounds, which effectively gave the Mosquito 18 seconds of firing time, although they very rarely would they fire off altogether, and they would fire short bursts of 2 to 3 seconds to avoid wasting ammunition and overheating the guns. The 20mm cannon had around 600 rounds, which gave it about a 15-second burst of fire. So in total, it could spit out 2,000 rounds of mixed ammunition. This meant really that a de Havilland Mosquito could throw out or had as much firepower which exceeded the combined guns of 2 Mark 9 Spitfires. The early bomber versions, which were the B Mark 4s, also could carry 4 250-pound bombs. And then the later bomber versions, they could carry 4 500-pound bombs. As time went on, the bomb bay was modified, and it could actually carry the 4,000-pound bomb, which was named the Cookie Blast Bomb. Other Mosquito variants, as well as carrying 2 500-pound bombs, one under each wing, they also carried 8 rocket projectiles, 4 60-pound projectiles under each wing of the Mosquito. They also had drop tanks for extended range instead of bombs and rockets. There was also special ordnance Mosquitoes that flew with Naval and Coastal Command that had depth charges and mines. Of course, and as we know, also had the Pathfinder Special Missions Mosquitoes. There is another operation, codenamed Servant, that the de Havilland Mosquito was involved in. It was timed to take place on May the 15th, 1943. It was recommended that the crews have at least 2 months of specialist training before any attack was launched. However, as the squadron had only been formed on the 1st of April, this gave the crews barely 6 weeks to prepare. Operation Servant was given the highest security classification, and the 618 Squadron itself was a top-secret squadron. Any mention of this operation was to be excluded from the minutes of meetings of the Chiefs of Staff of the Air Force and Navy. At RAF Skitten, strict security measures were put in place. The area of the airfield to be used by the squadron was cordoned off, and access was controlled by RAF police. special passes were needed to access the area. The windows of airfield operations room were sealed up and stronger doors fitted to upgrade the security. Any discussion of the operation was forbidden outside the operations room. As personnel and modified Mosquitoes began to arrive at RAF Skidden, the air crews began familiarising themselves with the aircraft and the low-level flying techniques that were required for the operation. The Mosquitoes that were to carry the bombs, which were also referred to as stores, started to arrive on the 17th of April. Low-level, high-speed attacks were practiced on the Bonaventure and an old depot ship moored in Loch Charnbane on the west coast of Southern in Scotland, while other Mosquitoes based at RAF Turnberry tested the Highball against the old French battleship Corbeil. Despite the squadron's preparations, problems and delays with the Highball itself meant that the target date was missed. It was recommended that Operation Servant was undertaken before the end of June, while the Tirpitz was still anchored in Trondheim Fjord in Norway. However, more problems with both Highball and its release mechanism meant that the date was also missed, and a realistic possibility that the operation could proceed at all. In early September 1943, Operation Servant was officially abandoned, and some of the squadron was posted to RAF Wicht to carry out other special duties. The remainder of the squadron was eventually moved to Australia, where they continued the development of Highball for use against Japanese ships. Despite all the effort put into the development of Highball, it was never actually used in anger. Could I again say a really huge thank you to all my new subscribers. The channel is growing quite fast at the moment, but it would be really appreciated if a few more of you could subscribe. It just gets the films shared around a bit more, gets them out there, gets them seen, and gets all that bit of history a bit more exposure. It's really appreciated, so if you could click the buttons, subscribe and thumbs up, it would be so much appreciated. Take care. Cheers. At the end of World War II, the de Havilland Mosquito transitioned from its combat roles into long-range reconnaissance, survey mapping and target towing. Though its frontline service eventually ended due to the advent of the jet aircraft, the versatile Wooden Wonder continued to serve with the Royal Air Force and other nations for nearly 2 decades. The last Mosquito combat mission in Europe occurred on May the 21st, 1945, when Coastal Command aircraft patrolled the Scottish coast searching for German U-boats that had not yet surrendered. In the Pacific, Mosquitoes of the Royal Australian Air Force were used to map Japanese-held territory in Borneo and the Dutch East Indies. The last combat sortie of the war was flown by the Royal Australian Air Force, mapping communist positions in Malaya in 1946. Post-war, the Mosquito's speed and adaptability meant it remained a valuable military asset for many years after the war. The RAF continued to use the high-altitude photographic reconnaissance variants, and the last RAF combat sortie was flown by a PR-34A on the December the 15th, 1955, mapping communist strongholds in the Malayan jungle. Targets towing was another use for the many B-35 bomber variants that were converted into target tugs for training anti-aircraft gunners. One of these target towing variants was the very last Mosquito in service with the RAF. It was retired on May the 9th, 1963, almost 20 years after the war ended. I really hope you found this short film and this short look at the various and the variety of armaments that the de Havilland Mosquito carried. I look forward to seeing you on the next film. Take the greatest of care. Cheers for now.